Welcome to the show. I'm Sean Ofelt, host of Nashville Leadership Perspectives, where I interview local leaders to share insights with members of the military community who are ultimately considering Nashville as their next destination. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dean Wegner, who is the founder and CEO of Authentically American and also a Army veteran. Welcome to the show, Dean.
Well, Sean, I'm honored to be a guest of yours, being a fellow veteran, entrepreneur, and wanting to promote Nashville. I love that I was invited.
Excellent. Well, real quick, just to start, if you could give us just a high-level overview of what Authentically American is, and then we'll dive much deeper into kind of all the inner workings in your background as well.
Well, let me do this, Sean. Let me start with just a quick personal introduction so people get
Perfect.
to know me a little bit better and it starts to align with my values and priorities in life, being God, family, country. So my wife and I, Kelly, Sean, last year in 2024 celebrated anniversary number 30.
That's amazing. Congrats.
You don't know me that well, but I'm a lot to put up with. So thankful for her love and partnership. And, we have four amazing kids. So we have two daughters, 26 and 23. We have a 20-year-old son who's a freshman Army hockey player like his dad at West Point, just fortunately much better than his dad. And then we have a 14-year-old son we adopted from Ethiopia. So, like I said, God, family, country, and I'm blessed. And, that's the little bit personally, so everyone can get to know me a little bit better. Now, you asked about Authentically American. So we are an apparel brand. So think of us like a Nike or Land's End, but instead of made in China, all made here in the US. Which, to give everyone an idea how rare American made is, I'm an Army veteran. And when I graduated from West Point in 1993, over 50% of the apparel was made in the US. Today, it's 3%.
Wow.
I mean, next to nothing is made here, and we want to build this iconic American brands, but the heart of our mission is our passion for creating American jobs, which is why it is only produced here in the U.S.
It's awesome. So we're gonna dive into how you're set up, where you operate, all that kind of great stuff. But what was the genesis for it? So if you can take us back to the birth of Authentically American.
So, Sean, just the quick overview as a veteran. So I graduated in West Point in 93, chose aviation as my branch. So I went to flight school, learned how to fly helicopters, but then had a unique opportunity that is closer to the world you were in the Navy. After flight school, had a unique opportunity and went to the Army Special Forces Ranger School.
Awesome.
It was miserable. It was absolutely awful, but didn't know it back then. But it was great training for leading a startup. No sleep and incredible stress, and that's the life I've been living as an entrepreneur. But I left the Army, Sean, after 7 years in 2000, and I tell everybody now I'm a veteran and an entrepreneur, but when I left the Army in 2000, couldn't even spell entrepreneur. You had no idea this world existed, and reason being, had an amazing dad growing up, and for 30 years, excuse me, he worked for a Fortune 500 company. And that's what all of his friends, that's what all of our neighbors did. So that's the only world I knew. So I worked for big companies like Procter and Gamble and Mars. And if you're not familiar with those names, I'm sure people are familiar with brands like Crest, Tide, and M&Ms. And so thankful for working there because they're both just world-class marketing and branding companies. And I learned a ton. But to give you some perspective, P&G is an $80 billion company and had some fairly big jobs and was very well paid. But I want to know that I'm making a difference and really just felt like a cog in the wheel. And that was the initial catalyst to become an entrepreneur. But Sean, when you can't spell entrepreneur, I didn't think I had it in me to build a business from scratch. So I entered the entrepreneurial ranks through acquisition and bought my first business in 2012. And it's one that you, and I'm sure everyone tuning in, has never heard of, but you've worn the military uniform before, so you're familiar. I bought a government contractor that produced dress uniforms for the military. So thousands of uniforms every week for Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. And that's what ultimately got me into the apparel industry. And one of the things I learned was the shocking history. Again, to give you an idea how rare American made is, I mean, it's only 3%.
Yeah.
And initially, Sean, being passionate about creating American jobs, my thought was I want to win more contracts, and I thought we'll create more jobs. But as I started to better understand the segment of government contracting that I was in, it was really a bidding process. So, Sean, if you and I are bidding on a contract and you had it before and I won, in essence, your job's transferred to me and there's no real job creation.
Yeah.
And that was that light bulb moment for me that said, what if? What if instead of being a government contractor, what if we built a brand? And I thought back to the days of Crest, Tide, and M&Ms. And I also thought, what if instead of what 97% of brands do and chase cheap labor overseas, what if we made the intentional choice to produce right here in the US? And that's where it started in 2017. So 7 years ago, from a blank sheet of paper with a vision to build this iconic American brand. And I'm exhausted. I mean, it's been the hardest, most challenging thing I've ever done, but truly am energized, truly feel like I have an opportunity to make a difference. And what's exciting, we're on the verge of being that overnight success story, 7 years in the making.
That's awesome. And there's a lot to unpack there. So we'll pick back up there. But you had said something interesting. When you transitioned out, you didn't even know what an entrepreneur was, essentially.
Yeah.
Did you have any insight at that time that maybe I want to go into my own business, or was it just what you knew, right? Fortune 500 companies, that was kind of the path that you saw yourself going down at transition?
I think, Sean, so oftentimes we're a product of our environment. And I looked up and loved and respected my dad. I'm like, you know what? I want to do what my dad did. He had a great career.
Yeah.
And I think you may have heard the term, obviously, entrepreneur, but there's another term out there, an entrepreneur. Somebody with an entrepreneurial spirit in a big company.
Yeah.
And I didn't know back then, but as I'm looking back, start to see that seeds of that entrepreneurial spirit, because I would often hear things like, well, Dean, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean? And they would be like, well, Dean, that's not the Procter way, or that's not the Martian way, when you're there at Procter and Gamble and Mars. And, I never did things just to do things differently, but was trying to be innovative, was trying to be creative and come up with new ways and better ways of doing things. So I think that was that entrepreneurial spirit, which often now is referred to as an entrepreneur, in a big Fortune 500 company.
Very interesting. So taking that, you started getting the entrepreneurial itch, if you will, and you went about it probably a lot different than most. I'm thinking of military members that are on active duty now, planning for a transition. A lot of military members have let's call it soft and hard skills to be an entrepreneur. But as you know, it's an extremely challenging and difficult and thankless effort. And you had mentioned, an overnight success, 7 years in the making. And I think the reality is most people don't understand that. They just see, they see these big companies that pop up and all of a sudden it's, wow, they just occurred overnight. When you actually look at it, they've been there for years, figuring their products out, figuring their services out. And only now did they finally hit the market and did they finally grow. So, your entry point into entrepreneurship by purchasing, can you walk me through that? And what did that decision-making process look like from your standpoint?
And it's interesting looking back, because I think, the term I've seen out there now is like ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. And that was just nothing that I realized was out there back then. I think there's a lot of resources and people that can help, pursuing that path. And, SBA has a great program, because you touched on this, Sean. I mean, veterans, are well equipped, well designed to embrace the entrepreneurial grind and, have that discipline and work ethic and, the ingenuity to go ahead and do it. Oftentimes they just need a little bit of help. And completely separate story, but if you are looking to be an entrepreneur and you're a veteran and you're not sure where to start, what's phenomenal is there's some incredible resources out there. So IBMF and Bunker Labs last year, they combined forces. So if you're a veteran and you want to be an entrepreneur, they help you do that. They will help you, build your business, build your idea, build your business plan, everything, so that you can be a successful veteran entrepreneur, what they refer to as a vetrepreneur. So I think there's a lot of resources out there. And for me, Sean, since I was not aware and a lot of that was not that developed, 14 years ago when I started, What I said is, I know a lot of people. I believe in investing in relationships. And I was super busy at Mars, but I said, I'm going to set a goal for myself at least once a week. Once a week, I'm going to meet with a business owner, a business broker, financial advisor, just people all across the industry trying to learn and understand what's out there.
Hmm.
And it didn't happen right away, but a year and a half later, met somebody who introduced me to the former owners of the company that I bought. And it was just that discipline and that perseverance and setting that goal for myself that, I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to start, asking questions and really start to invest and learn. So that's ultimately the long journey that led to purchasing my first business in 2012.
And was there anything along that path that led you to the apparel, or was it just, the apparel industry, or was it just by chance that that was a connection you made, and then as you explored it, those opportunities opened up?
I think it was by chance, really, Sean, but being such a firm foundation in my Christian faith, I think God had this plan that He was orchestrated, and I'm diligent on my knees praying every morning, for my guidance and provision. And I think it was just something as I look back through my career and all the different steps and everything that's been there along the way. I mean, every step, from West Point instilling values and character and that service and mission, to Army service and Ranger School and that discipline and work ethic and embracing that grind, to the Procter and Gamble and Mars days and the lessons I learned from marketing and branding and everything, to the company I bought and ultimately bringing me into the apparel industry. Each and every one of those steps along the journey have allowed me to have some modest level of success that we're having right now.
Yeah. Now that's excellent. And you're right. Bunker Labs, and we know Blake, who used to run
Oh,
that,
yeah.
and that obviously merged with IVMF, and now they're kind of off and running, still doing it. There's definitely more resources now than there ever has been for veterans that are interested in becoming
Mhm.
entrepreneurs. It's interesting because I think we see this a lot with military members thinking that they've got to get everything perfect, that transition, right? They've got to find that perfect job or that perfect career path that's going to be, take them to where they need to go for the next 20 years. And the reality is that's often not true, right? It's often get out there, start working, gain an income, figure that path out, and then be deliberate in charting your course. And what I think really jumps out is you didn't necessarily know, it sounds like, that you were ultimately, your goal was, okay, I'm going to become an entrepreneur in a year and a half. But you said, okay, I've got these, there's something of interest here, right? You had mentioned entrepreneur, and you started networking and started just engaging and having conversations and learning. And through that process, while it took a year and a half, you ultimately learned of the apparel industry, learned of a company that was in there, and were able to acquire that. I think that's really powerful for military members to understand. It's even that process didn't happen overnight, right? That was a very long process. It sounds like you had set yourself up to ensure that success. And I think one of the biggest, riskiest things for any entrepreneur is you have an idea, even with support to solidify that idea and launch that idea. It is a lot of hard work, right? The hard work never stops,
Ah,
and the grind never stops. And
mhm.
even with the best idea, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to create a viable business. Um, and obviously, you went a route where you acquired an existing business, which I think was, probably a mitigation, right? In the grand scheme of things, if you look back on it, okay, that was a risk that you were able to mitigate because it was a fully operational business with a
Sure.
contract,
Mhm.
which is a very interesting route to go. So you're in the apparel industry, running the
And
government
let me
contract. Yeah,
share one
yeah.
thing that, I used to struggle with, and somebody shared this mantra with me. And the idea is you can't create and perfect at the same time. And so often with many entrepreneurs, I should say more aspiring entrepreneurs, oftentimes, veterans who have been in that, high level of accountability and discipline and want to get things, as perfect as they can. I think sometimes they're like, well, I'm not ready. And I'm not ready. And, I will coach and mentor a lot of entrepreneurs. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you're not ready? And they're like, well, it's not perfect. It's not exactly the way I want it to be. And then I'm like, well, does it work? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, well, that's that MVP, that minimum viable product, which reinforces that you can't create and perfect at the same time. So the important thing is if it works, it's at that minimum, viable level, then launch and then find customers. And this is the value and the gift of feedback. Because if you start working with customers and they're great customers of yours and you've got the right customer service approach, they'll give you feedback. They'll give you ideas on how to improve and enhance. So, I'm a big believer in embracing that continuous feedback mindset. So, if you launch that MVP, that minimum viable product, you've got customers that you're working with, you can refine and enhance over time. I mean, one example, everyone's got a phone, an iPhone. iPhone didn't launch iOS version 18 day one. I mean, it's been 1.001, and then it continues to grow. So I think there's many examples out there where what, get that product out there, start learning, and then grow and enhance from there.
Yeah, that's a great piece of feedback, and you're right. I've seen that in my own journey as well. Right, trying to perfect it, and the reality is you just got to get it out there. Get it out there, get that feedback, and figure it out. So as you launched into the government contracting world, which I think is of interest in and of itself. I think there's a lot of interest from military members
Oh
into
yeah.
that, and kind of maybe not a very clear path on what that looks like. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. If you do, great. If not, we can kind of keep going.
Well, Sean, you're going to hear a consistent theme from me and just the value of investing in relationships and really getting to know people. And there's, other stories I can share about the first few investors who, came on board and believed in Authentically American. But when it comes to government contracting, if you're a veteran and you want to get into the government contracting business, one organization I would recommend that you look up is NVSBC. NVSBC is the National Veterans Small Business Coalition, and they're an organization that exists to help veterans who want to get into government contracting, learn and grow and educate and understand. So they have networking events and, training and seminar all across the country, and they are based out of DC. So if you're tuning in and you're a veteran, like, what, I'd like to be in government contracting, join NVSBC or at least, check out one of their events.
Excellent. No, I appreciate that. So as you're in the government contracting space, at that point, was that all, were your supply chains and everything like that, was that all American made?
It absolutely was. And, Sean, by law, everything for the military, it's the Berry Amendment, has to be sourced, produced, manufactured here in the US. And again, it was more of a, bidding process than being able to be innovative and build this brand.
Yeah.
And I think in some respects, I felt like the, P&G and Mars days where I was building on somebody else's legacy.
Right.
And that's something that's important to me. And, we've been at it 7 years, so feeling good about what the future holds, but, nothing for certain that we're going to be successful. I mean, it'd be tough to weather another COVID.
Sure.
But what I'm truly excited about, and I wish every member of the Authentically American team was here because, they want to know, like me, that we're making a difference. And when only 3% of the apparel in the US is American made, and we have this incredibly amazing product and we're helping create American jobs, I mean, we as a team truly feel like we have an opportunity to make a difference, build this iconic brand and ultimately leave a legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. So at what point in running that government contracting company, you had mentioned you realized that you weren't actually creating jobs. You were just it was more or less just shifting, right, back and forth from whoever had the contract. That seemed like it was the spark for this idea of creating a brand. Can you walk me through what that looked like, right? How you came to Authentically American from a branding standpoint or brand idea?
So there's two things at play, Sean. One is, truly wanted to go ahead and, build this iconic American brand, and the experience at P&G and Mars and working on brands like Crest and Tide and M&M's, brought me down the path. But, I also mentioned each and every step along the way felt like it was God's master plan to have me go down the path we're in now. And if I'm being truly honest, which I always am, I mean, there were a lot of trials and tribulations and real big challenges we endured.
Yeah.
And one of them, for example, working with the government was cash flow. And, while I was active duty, went to school at night, got my MBA, and I learned about cash flow and I understood the concept. Hey, you get people to pay you fast and you take your time, paying everyone else. And, at P&G and Mars, had a cash flow scorecard and had a finance team that managed that. But, when you're in an $80 billion company, Sean, it really doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's just, numbers that are just on a scorecard. But here's a story that taught me about, what cash flow really means as a small business owner, because this was 2013, 14, when there was that government shutdown.
Yep.
The initial anxiety was, well, are we still going to be in business because there's a government shutdown? And, being in the government military uniform business, we were deemed essential. So we were still, producing. So we still had revenue. But one thing that was cut back was DFAS, which was Defense, Finance, and Accounting. And our standard terms, we were paid in 4 weeks. When half of DFAS was no longer there, 4 weeks went to 6 weeks. And I'm like, well, that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Until I realized that when we're doing 200,000 in revenue a week and we're getting delayed, that means I had to come up with 400,000, real dollars to go ahead and meet payroll, to pay suppliers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, now I understand what cash flow means. Now I understand, why it can be such a big challenge. So there was, challenges like that, and we could talk more. But I think one of it's the vision to build this iconic American brand. But there are also a lot of challenges that said, what, I don't want to necessarily be reliant on having the government, be my only customer.
Sure.
And that was, the motivation to build the brand.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And I appreciate you sharing that story, because cash flow is definitely, it's one thing to have revenue, and that's great coming in, but it's that balancing act of, especially when you're, in startup mode and you're trying to grow a business, it's tricky. So as you embarked on that, you had mentioned earlier, bringing in some kind of, or I should say, some initial investors into the concept.
Yes.
At that point, what were you envisioning Authentically American to be, or what was the what did that pitch look like to the investors that you ultimately engaged with?
The vision from day one, Sean, has not changed. Wanting to build this iconic American brand, have it truly American made, knowing that only 3% is made here in the U.S. But I'll share a story about the first few investors that hopefully will resonate with everyone tuning in, because it's the same theme around investing in relationships. And I mentioned having my MBA in finance, but I never truly considered myself a finance expert. And when it came time to build a business plan, to come up with a 3-year pro forma financial forecast, I'm like, I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to do this alone. So, I reached out to 3 of my friends who were current or former CFOs, and, very sheepishly, knowing how busy they were, I'm like, hey, would you be willing to help? I really need a little bit of help. And they're like, Dean, would I ever? I mean, you were always there for me. Anytime I need something, you stepped up for me. So I'm absolutely willing to help. So, we spent a month, building this whole plan, building the business plan, building the forecast, the 3-year pro forma financial forecast. And this was almost like Shark Tank, because, we were really trying to understand, well, what's the valuation? Is it too high? Is it too low? Is it just about right? And one of the CFOs, Sean, said, Dean, I actually feel really good about the work that we did. I mean, it's comprehensive, it's in detail, and I feel really good about it. And I actually feel good about the valuation. I think it's actually a little bit conservative, and here's why. Here's your first check.
It's awesome.
And it was a 6-figure check.
Yeah.
And then when I went to the next few investors, they're like, hey, Dean, this sounds great, but where in the heck did you come up with this valuation? I'm like, well, I already have, my first investor check.
Yeah.
And I was blown away, because we raised initial $500,000, Sean, in seed capital, and it was 30 days.
Wow.
And
awesome.
It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen over 30 days. It happened over the previous 20 years, being super intentional and investing in relationships.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And there's an underlying theme I just keep hearing, right, which is that intentional relationship building from day one.
Absolutely.
And military members that are transitioning out, everyone tells them build a network, engage. It's a tricky thing, right? It's tough. It's not the easiest thing to do. To your point, you have to be intentional about it, and in most cases, it's not going to get any result that moment, right? But you never know where it's going to get you 15, 20 years down the line. In your case, it clearly paid off. As you shifted into Authentically American, what challenges did you face early on that you weren't necessarily expecting?
Well, Sean, we may have to add another 30 minutes to even start to touch on it. But, here is kind of the initial premise I had when we launched Authentically American. My initial thought, Sean, was everyone was like you. Everyone was like me and many people tuning in. I thought, just the fact that we were American made and so little is made here, I thought everyone would love our brand just for that fact alone.
Yeah.
And I've learned two things over the last 5 years is number one, most people don't know where their shirt is made.
Yeah.
And I'm actually okay with that because that gave birth to our tagline, "Where is yours made?"
Mm-hmm.
And Sean is designed to be provocative, like, "Hey, Sean, great looking shirt. Where is yours made?"
Yeah.
And we want you to go ahead and look at the tag the next time you buy a shirt or you put one on and be like, "Made in China." I mean, I'm a veteran. I love this great nation of ours. I don't want to be wearing a shirt that's made overseas. I want something American made.
Yeah.
But the second part, Sean, that I learned is flat out, most people don't care.
Yeah.
They flat out just don't care. And I think now that I'm over my anger issues with that, I think I've embraced as a new brand in an ultra competitive apparel industry. You know what? We can't be all things to all people.
Yeah.
In the old P&G and Mars days, we literally had a Super Bowl ad budget so you can have a much broader target. But we've shifted our mantra from trying to be all things to all people to my new mantra is the riches. Ours is the riches are in the niches.
Yeah.
And although not everyone cares, Sean, one group that does care is the veteran.
Yeah.
And you can go to our website now, authenticallyamerican.us, and you can buy your new favorite polo, t-shirts, or socks as an individual consumer, but 90% of our revenue is custom. So we work with hundreds and hundreds of businesses. Many of them are veteran owned. They're all patriotic, and they don't want their employees wearing a shirt that's made in China.
Yeah.
They don't want their employees wearing a Nike polo. They want a brand like Authentically American. They just don't know we exist.
Yeah.
That's a small reason why I was thankful for, the invite to join you on your podcast, because you know what, now, many people in your audience, many people tuning in likely have never heard of Authentically American, and we truly have amazing product. And when you find out that it's all American made and we're also competitively priced with, no national brands, what we find out, we're picking up a ton of customers once they know who we are.
That's awesome. And Dean, I can definitely align to that story. I mean, throughout, I don't know, call it the last decade, it's amazing how many things you can't find that are made here in the U.S. I sometimes joke, for whatever reason, I just have this, it's like, if I can buy it from the U.S., I'll buy it. Mm-hmm. Trying to find stuff that's manufactured 100% here in the various different categories. It's amazing. It's amazing how difficult that is. And I've spent time just in the past. It's sort of just something I do whenever it's okay. Hey, I'm going to buy blank, right? Can I get something? Sure. You can go to Amazon and you can find all sorts of stuff that are going to, that's going to likely break in the next couple of days. But, is there something here where I can get it from someone in the U.S. that's created here in the U.S.? And it's just incredibly difficult. And it's amazing. And I've seen so many veterans, jump in and start creating stuff and actually, building and manufacturing stuff here in the U.S. And, I think it's invigorating. I hope that catches on more. it's but you're right. There's a lot of people that just don't care, right? And it really comes down to convenience and how fast can I get something, and it is what it is. So,
Yeah.
the fact that you've niched down and are really focused in that veteran space makes a lot of sense.
And Sean, when you say you niche down, because that was in my initial thought. If you said, well, Dean, veterans love American made, why don't you focus there? I would have said, Sean, it's too small. I mean, there's not
Right.
enough business. But as we did our due diligence, there's 400,000 veteran-owned businesses with 10 or more employees.
It's awesome.
There's 40,000 veteran-focused charities, and then even big Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies have what they refer to as a veteran employee resource group.
Yep.
So a small little affinity group. So through Pepsi Valor, for example, is how we got in with Pepsi. Through RTX Vets is how we got in with Raytheon. So, I mean, that veteran focus, and less is more is really allowing our brand to start to take off.
That's
But
phenomenal.
can I do this, Sean? Can I show you one of our hero products?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because obviously veteran owned and American made is very important to us, and it's something we believe in. But, at the end of the day, we're a consumer brand. And we have to deliver that wow, amazing product experience. And we're going to have a little fun with me being Army and you being Navy. I mean, there's, an incredible college rivalry with the Army-Navy game.
Absolutely.
And I know 364 days, we love each other, but on that one day, we really don't like each other. And we also have collegiate licenses. So, Sean, can you see this okay?
I can.
Yeah, it's a little bit reversed, but you know what?
Yep.
So one, I wish you were here in Nashville with me, because if you could feel this, you'd be like, Dean, that has got to be the softest t-shirt I've ever felt. And that's by design, because who doesn't love a nice soft t-shirt? And it's not just the fabric. We use a soft hand print to include tagless.
Awesome.
So that's the way all of our t-shirts are. But this one has a special innovation, our sweat activated print innovation. So you know what a fierce rivalry it is. So watch what happens when I spray this. Can you see what just appeared?
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and say it, Sean. I'll make it even bigger on the back. Yeah. Two of my favorite words. So beat Navy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It appears, because Sean, I'm highlighting this because, as an entrepreneur, I mean, you really need to understand what your business, what your brand is all about. And we're a consumer brand, and people ultimately need to say, like, wow, Dean. And they've literally said this, I don't care where it's made, because the shirt is so soft and comfortable. And that technology you have, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And back to the custom side, it's completely custom. So whatever you want printed, whatever you want magically to appear, we can do. So we've created hundreds and hundreds of designs, and our businesses, for example, will have their values or have their mission state magically appear, reinforcing the value of hard work. And the best compliment we get from businesses and charities that we work with, when they say, Dean, I love it when we partner with you, because we had an event. We made everyone wear their shirt on Friday, but they want to wear it on Saturday. It's their new favorite, and that's great grassroots marketing. And we share with them the why behind why we're working with a veteran-owned company, why we insist on American-made. And that's how we're helping a lot of businesses, is, creating a higher level of engagement, which leads to lower turnover, which ultimately, leads to a more successful business.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dean, you had prior to the show, or prior to going live, I should say, we were just kind of talking about how you're structured from a business standpoint. Obviously, you're in Nashville. The company's headquartered in Nashville. You have several different manufacturers or suppliers, I should say, that you're working with around the country that are all U.S. owned, U.S. made. Can you walk us through that, just a little bit? So somebody that's thinking about this industry, this space, your company as a potential employer, gets a little insight into how that's structured.
And Sean, I think the stories I'll share here are not unique to apparel. I love creating a tangible product like the shirt I just showed you, but I'm not a manufacturing expert. And within the apparel industry, the most common manufacturing model is contracted. So Nike, for example, produces in China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, all around the world, but they don't own those facilities. It's contracted.
Yeah.
Same model for us. So the t-shirt that I just showed you, for example, we produce in Texas. We've been blessed to be on national TV quite a bit. So these fun, patriotic socks, if you read the fine print on the packaging, it says designed in Nashville and made in North Carolina. So that's where we make our socks. We've got some fun Hawaiian shirts we make in Georgia. So, it's the same contracted manufacturing model, but instead of all around the world, it's all right here in the US. And the reason as a business that's helpful, all those employees that, are working to go ahead and build this amazing product, they're not on my payroll exactly.
Yeah.
You know, all the machinery and equipment and building, it's not on my balance sheet. So it's a much more, financial friendly way from a manufacturing standpoint to go ahead and, build a business, build a brand.
Dean, how hard was it finding? So you had mentioned, right, like Nike, they're in, they're overseas essentially, right? Their suppliers are overseas. How hard was it for you as you were pulling this all together to find those American manufactured, 100% American manufactured suppliers?
Well, Sean, you heard me mention, how, each and every step along the way I've been, faithful in God's guidance and provision, because if I was to start today fresh and new, I mean, it would be incredibly challenging and difficult. But that's where the 5 years, leading and owning and managing that government contractor that produced uniforms for the military, because that allowed me to be in the apparel industry for 5 years, and we were a manufacturer. And I wanted to build a brand, but what that 5 years allowed me to do was find the best darn t-shirt maker in the country, which we found in Texas. We would provide them our specs, all of our product details, and they produce it for us. And then we as a company focus on the marketing, focus on the customer experience, focus on the sales, which is where more of my background, my expertise, and what I enjoy more. Same way, people love, our socks, incredibly soft and comfortable. When we found the best darn sock maker in the country in North Carolina. So it was 5 years. So I'm a little bit slow on the uptake. So fortunately, I had 5 years, to learn.
Yeah, that's excellent though, and I'm sure it was no easy feat, but it's great in the sense that not only are you building a brand and you've got your business and you've got employees, but then you're also strengthening each one of those other employer brands, and ultimately to your whole idea, right, of what you lacked in the government contracting space was that idea of creating jobs. So the bigger your brand gets, the more demand you have, which drives more need on the supplier side, right? Which creates more jobs there as well.
Sean, and I'm a big believer in the rising tide, because it is a great time right now, to be an American made.
Absolutely.
And I want more people, not just in apparel, but across industries to say, you know what, not everything can be made here, but there are some products that can be American made. There are some products that can have, high level of quality and still be parity price. And I want more people, to get into it and make that intentional American made choice. And, that's that rising tide that's going to raise all boats. That's going to raise all businesses that are in this space.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dean, we had mentioned right before, from your standpoint, for a person that's thinking about getting into the apparel industry or interested, from a brand side, you often have a lot of sales and operations type roles, and that may be expanding here in the near future. Is that right?
We are expanding, and back to that niche to focus on veterans and veteran-owned businesses, and that 400,000. So, I guess another lesson learned for us, because I'd mentioned all the national TV we've had with being on Fox and Friends many times, being on MSNBC, in Forbes magazine. So we've had this, PR and marketing machine that we built, which has created a great brand halo. But Sean, when 90% of your revenue is custom and you're working with, hundreds and hundreds of businesses, the brand halo really doesn't help that much.
Right.
We realize we don't want to get away from the PR and marketing machine we built, but now we want to build this client-focused selling machine. So that's what we're launching this year. So we just made the first offer on Friday. Awesome. And we want that first one to be the first that we learn and grow and understand the new systems and process, since we didn't have a sales team before.
Yeah.
But then we want a second, third, fifth, 10th, 20th. I mean, when there's 400,000 veteran-owned businesses alone, I mean, that's a huge market. So
Absolutely.
super excited. And I'm a hockey player, so I want that hockey stick type inflection point. And I'm excited that this is going to be a year that's going to happen.
That's awesome, Dean. Well, Dean, I really appreciate you, you sharing more about Authentically American, sharing your story, sharing how you got from where you were to where you are today. Any closing comments or anything that you'd like to share with, members of the military that are at that transition point, whether it's coming off of active duty or even a veteran that's looking at a transition point in their life?
So, Sean, a longer story related to Ranger School, but Ranger School, prepared me for being an entrepreneur, given the grind that I endured. I mean, for 72 days straight, lived on one meal a day and 2 to 3 hours sleep a night. And day one, there were 340 of us. After 72 days, we lost 80% of our class, and there were only 70 of us. And me, Sean, being a flight suit wearing aviator, had no business being in Ranger School, let alone graduating. But the lesson that I learned is life can be tough. Life can be incredibly challenging, so don't go it alone. In day one at Ranger School, you're assigned a Ranger buddy, and your Ranger buddy is there to have your back, to always be there for you and always step up. And back then it was Marine Corps Infantry Sergeant Roy Backey, and 30 years later, we still keep in touch. So
Awesome.
my number one piece of advice for, a veteran, an entrepreneur, anyone wanting to go down this challenging path is don't go it alone. Find that Ranger buddy in life, or find, multiple people that can help you. I mean, there may be somebody that can help you from a finance standpoint, somebody else from a legal, somebody else from a marketing, but, don't be shy about asking for help, especially if you have done your part and really invested in those relationships over years.
Yeah. Now, it's a great piece of advice, Dean. And I hope people listen to it and take it into account as they launch their journeys or adjust their journeys. But again, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show, sharing all your insight. Wish the best for you this year as you grow and hopefully get to that hockey stick trajectory quicker rather than later.
Well, it's definitely planned, and we're going to make it happen. Failure is not an option, and that's that Army Ranger, that Army hockey player in me that's going to make sure it's happened. But it's been a pleasure to get to know you, Sean. You do a fantastic job as a host for this show, and thank you for helping spread the word with veterans, especially focused on Nashville.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dean. Appreciate it.